I'm here to talk about life for us as young people. Because what I've seen a lot recently, even in my own comment section, people saying how tough life is. And in my recent video that went semi-viral to about 50,000 views, I spoke about the fact that a lot of young people are moving away. That's because, to cut a long story short, better living conditions can be found for cheaper in foreign countries. And we're seeing a lot of people doing that at the minute. Now, what surprised me in that video was the way that a lot of people in the comment section were thinking. A lot of the young people thought that it's not necessarily about the quality of life in the UK or where you can find the best value for your money. It's life as a whole. People think life is very tough. Now, whether it's pay and things in that regards or other different characteristics, in a lot of ways living conditions are falling in first world countries or developed nations, whatever you wish to call them. You could say living conditions in some of these are falling. And I would, in some ways, have to agree with you. Here in the UK, try get a new dentist on the NHS, try get anything on the NHS. It's near impossible unless it's an absolute emergency. And of course, by waiting until it's an emergency, you're doing a lot in terms of what you would have basically prevented with care first. But anyway, what I'm saying is, whilst life conditions are kind of dropping in a way, we have it really good here. Our young people and all people alive today who live in the Western world specifically have access to paved roads to walk on, have access to healthcare in some form, have access to the potential to make something of your life. And again, we can make the argument that a lot of the power is being shifted to the rich, and I think that is partially true. But there's still a great opportunity to make something great of your life if you try hard. So, if all of this opportunity is still out there, why do so many of our young people feel like they can't claim it? Well, let's look into that. Well, I think it's safe to say that if we want to achieve something with our lives, whether it's just self-actualization or something else, we need to have an idea of what it is that we're working towards. And I feel like this is a first hurdle where a lot of our young people are failing. Because quite frankly, there's no vision. It's quite hard at the minute. People don't know where to look, and I understand that, at this age, there's so much pressure put on us as to what we should do, what we want to do, and it may not be what we actually want to do. Now, when you add this element of confusion and pressure through work and school and having to achieve something for the system in your life to a group of people who are already confused, you give this message even more strength in a way. People feel like more of a failure, when in actuality, you're not a failure at all. If you're under 25, it's basically impossible to be a failure, because you've not even had the chance to be anything yet, and this is important to understand. I think another huge thing to consider is the way that living life has changed in even the last 20 years or so. When I started out with technology, my best phone back in the day was the iPhone 4, and we didn't even have Wi-Fi at that time, I don't think. So look back to where we were then and where we are now. We've got all this technology that should be bringing us closer together, but if anything, it seems to be making us more isolated. When we spend so much time on the internet, two things can become true. The first one is we get an unrealistic view of what we're looking at. We see people doing so much better. We see things in the world that we like, we see things in the world that we don't like, and it can give us a warped perception, whether that's a warped perception on society, whether that's a warped perception on value and what we should really work to achieve. That's kind of lost amongst our young people, and it seems to be the case that a lot of people in the younger demographic have a lot of trouble understanding this. Now, when you combine this with a terrible factor, which is the fact that the more time you spend online, often the less time you spend in the real world enjoying things, you've got a terrible picture. So you end up with this scenario where people basically spend as much time, if not more time, on the internet, time that they should really be spent in getting a real understanding of the world. This takes away from our social skills, and this is something that I see time and time again. People out there in the world that are amazing people. I see it at university and even in the street when you try to interact with people. Once you get to know them, they're as good as anybody else. But in a lot of our young people, they couldn't, even if they needed to, have a random chat with somebody. And of course, it's not everyone's cup of tea. But it's these sort of social skills and understandings that we rely on. Because as humans, we're a sort of tribal species. That's why we live in cities, that's why we live together. We're not isolated, and we shouldn't be isolated. And when we become isolated, we end up with a big problem, and I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of our people's confidence right now. A lot of the experiences that we're seeing for our young people, things that you and me and people from the past especially would take for granted, people don't have the opportunity to do anymore. And it's like, well, why is that? To be honest, a lot of it is their fault. To solve this problem, we need to understand what it is. The problem is, for a lot of people, not that they're failures, but that they're not doing anything to try and be a success. You're not a failure if you don't try. Well, you are in a way, but you can't actively fail at something that you don't try with. Step one is to give something a go. Now, for me, it might be business. For you, it might be, I don't know, getting in the gym. I do that too, but you get the point. It might be, I don't know, learning how to play an instrument. It might be something as simple as learning how to talk to people. And it's like, none of these is wrong. Different steps for different people. We're all at different stages of our lives. And that's a brilliant thing about life. But understand this and basically play it to your advantage, because if you're young, you have this time, you have this window to essentially learn. And people, as a young person myself, people do not judge you for it. Because what I think a lot of these people who get in this cycle of, you know, oh, I'm a failure, this and that, they don't understand that in the real world, people understand how it is to be young. You're not expected to know anything, and that's fine, that's good. So with that for the context, what is the actual problem? Well, I think it comes down to a risk tolerance thing. And I mean this in the simplest sense. You see, everything in life takes risk, whether it's crossing the road, walking to the shops, starting a new business. Any of this stuff is hard, in a way, because it always has a risk of something going wrong. Now, of course, certain things have got a lot more risk than others, that's definitely true, but everything has its inherent risk. And I think what we're seeing now with a lot of young people is life's so comfortable in a way that it's become hard, because you don't have to take that risk so much anymore. I mean, with the way that everything is, a lot of people mature a lot later, it seems to be. And I think the reason for that is because they don't take any risks whatsoever. You know, this channel that I have here, I'm not saying it's a business, it's something, right? I'm putting myself out there, I get lovely comments, thank you all for those. I get bad comments, not so much for those, thank you. But, you know, it's something, it's putting yourself out there. That's a risk. I risk my money when I invest in, say, the stock market. I risk my money when I start new businesses and stuff like that. And I risk my potential reputation and the like when you're running these businesses, because what happens if it fails and stuff like that. And I don't want to make this one so much about business, but it is a perfect example. You see this trend so much in young people. They can't do anything. They can't talk to random people. They can't. It seems to be the case with young men particularly, but they can't talk even to the opposite gender. It's like, these sorts of things are problematic, no matter how you see it, because whether it's making friends, you know, talking to people of the opposite gender, whether it's finding a new job or something like that, these are the building blocks of a basic life in this part of the world. That's how we do things, right? That's how we've always done things. And yes, things are getting tougher, but some of that, quite frankly, is down to a lack of effort, and people won't like that. It's like, how can you say we're not putting in effort when things are so hard? It's true. And it's true you need to put in more effort to achieve basically less and less, but that's a minuscule amount, right? People massively underestimate what you still can achieve. You can do amazingly well. It's not hard. And it starts with these building blocks in life, because it's like, oh, I'm a failure. You can't be a failure because you've never tried anything. I think, and it may be contrary to what some people believe, but I think a lot of people will agree, if you don't know what to do, your best bet, in my opinion, is always to do something. Because whether it's stuff like, you know, me making this channel, whether it's stuff like me going for this bike ride, all of that sort of stuff is experience. You know, you're doing something and you're learning something, and it's when you don't do anything that you really start to fail, because you don't give yourself the chance. You know, I've had some terrible experiences where I've had businesses fail, where I've lost a lot of money in the stock market, and I've been like, oh, this is not good. Or when you have certain interactions with people that don't go well, you know, fall out with friends, you know, you might have issues with work, blah, blah, blah. But what's the lesson from these issues? Well, spoiler alert, there always is one. You always do learn something. And that's, if anything, that's the most important thing to note. You do always learn something. And I feel like that's what people have kind of missed, really. You do always learn something. So instead of worrying about what happens if it goes wrong or when it goes wrong, what happens when it goes wrong could benefit you. And it can be the toughest times when it does, but you will learn from those tough times subsequently. So how do we go about fixing this problem with our youth? I think what we need to do with a lot of people, because, you know, people like myself, let's say, and I don't say this to brag, it's just the case, I don't feel lost in life. I feel like I know where I want to go, but I don't yet have the means to facilitate it. And it's not great to you know, see what you want to do and not be able to do it, but I can kind of get on board with that because there's a vision there, and there is a goal there, and there is something to work towards. So that's one thing, right? That's easy. We need to re-instill that into our young people and give them the work ethic to try. Obviously, we can talk about work itself, but I don't think that's relevant. You know, your job is not your personality, or for a lot of people it shouldn't be. For most people it shouldn't be. But what we do see as a sad trend is out of work, people can't socialise. It's like that is one of the most fundamental building blocks of life, because you get your little group of people. It's like, I know some people focus on only money, and money is obviously a nice thing to have, right? It gives you a nicer life. But at the same time, if you don't get these fundamental building blocks of what you want and how to get it correct, you're going to fail. And I don't say that to be mean. It is just an obvious fact when you think about it. If you don't try, you will fail. You will not succeed. It's not going to be possible to do that. It is quite interesting with that train tracks running in the background. But yeah, you can't succeed if you don't try. So if I was, well, I am, and I do this myself. This is something that I actively practice. But for others who might be watching the video, if I was aged between, say, 16 and 27, or maybe even 25, let's say, what would I do to stop feeling like a failure? I'd think about what it is that I want in life, and I'd try and achieve it. Because I said this before about a different topic, and I'll say it again about this one. Whether it's the businesses that fail, whether it's the friendships and relationships that don't work out, whether it's for me the fact that I drive around in a car that half the time doesn't work. These are the experiences that you generally are going to have. No one's born with a full skill set. You're going to need to learn it. And it's never going to be a straight road to success. You're going to have a lot of failures on it. Can you accept that? And if you can't, why? If you can learn to accept that failure is a part of life, you can achieve something, because that's the toughest thing, right? It's understanding that you need to basically power through a lot of the discomfort, sit there in those uncomfortable positions and situations and be okay with it, because you're not going to be able to get past it until you accept it. Anyway, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.